Welcome to Independence Guitar. It is great to have you here. I'm going to go ahead and skip the formalities as I have quite a doozy to get to today. I just want to let you know that this video, or at least the intention of this video, is to give you the information that I've collected, and hopefully one of you or many of you out there will carry the torch and continue the research and try to, I guess, uncover some of the blind spots and fill in some of the holes that myself and other people haven't been able to figure out yet. Now, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm referring to the video wherein Paul Davids played the $10 million Monterey Jimi Hendrix Stratocaster. And in case you weren't aware, there is a lot of controversy and a lot of concern around whether or not that actually is the guitar that belonged to Jimi Hendrix that he played that night at the Monterey Pop Festival. Normally, this isn't the kind of thing that I would concern myself with, but just given that the guitar is going for the price of $7 to $10 million, I wouldn't want somebody to be out that kind of money if this is indeed deceptive practices. More so, and more importantly to me, some YouTubers that I really like and respect have been being slandered and misrepresented and thrown under a bus, and I just don't think it's right, and I think it's time to put an end to it. And yeah, I'm going to shed some light on this thing. Let's get into it. So, in early December, Paul Davids uploaded a video titled, "I Played Jimi Hendrix's $10 million Stratocaster." Now, given that he has multiple millions of subscribers, it's pretty much statistically inevitable that some of us would go and Google and research more into the guitar. However, I never would have realized the storm that I would have found myself in, and how I pretty much wish that I had never started researching the guitar in the first place. Because what has ensued since is a perfect example of why you should never for any reason take the word at face value of anyone trying to sell you anything. Now, I've made a handful of videos on my channel, but I've never really taken it seriously. I've never really put the time and effort into my content, as I just don't consider myself a YouTuber. Anyway, the only reason I brought this up is because in the beginning of January, I had posted my first video where I had really put time and effort and due diligence, about a month's worth, into a video, and very shortly afterward, about 45 minutes and 50 views later, I would find myself in a situation where I would have to take it down. Believe me when I tell you, I was kind of butthurt and a little mad about it. Now, many of us had our doubts about the authenticity of the guitar that Paul Davids played in his video. However, I just don't think that he had anything to do with it. But until he released his video, this guitar that supposedly belonged to Jimi Hendrix, 165 CBS transition era salt and pepper Fender Stratocaster, was pretty much chalked up to an unknown, as there just is no public history of what happened to it after Jimi Hendrix retired it shortly after the Monterey Pop Festival. The guitar's claim to fame is that it was used to play the song Hey Joe, as well as a few others in this particular concert that was pivotal to Jimi Hendrix gaining a foothold and eventually becoming a titan in the rock and roll and blues world. Now, even when putting this particular concert into context, whenever people hear about the Monterey Stratocaster, what usually comes to mind is the red and white Stratocaster that was lit on fire at the end of the show. Now, think about that for a second. For those of you that know about the red and white Strat, you know that it was an already busted up, barely usable guitar that Jimmy rigged well enough to work for the very last part of the show so that he could intentionally appear so badass that he sets his guitars on fire. Now, many of us who had concerns about the guitar raised them by posting videos about it. There was even one mainstream publication that was helping to lead the charge. Now, my own video was about 46 minutes long, where I gave my own perspective as well as many others, and I cited every link and source that I used. My goal wasn't to make any kind of definitive conjecture as to whether the guitar was authentic or not. I just wanted to hopefully motivate people to look into it for themselves and form their own opinion. However, I wasn't going to do anything without having some very seriously reliable sources to back up my claims. But shortly after releasing my video, I became aware that a huge majority of the sources that I had cited had been kneecapped and taken down. Why? Even one of the YouTube channels that was helping to lead the charge took down multiple videos. To me, I was like astonished. How could that be? Did something happen that I was unaware of? Was it proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that this guitar was in fact the Monterey Stratocaster? Did the owner or Miles present some kind of piece of providence that cleared the whole thing up and put it to bed? All I know is that these are not the kind of publications and people that usually back down at the first sign of trouble. So I spent a massive amount of time searching and going back over my sources, but I couldn't find anything of the sort. So my fears at the time were that one, that the argument had already been debunked, that I would be the lone fool posting my video just completely ignorant to that fact, and that even though I had put a bunch of time into researching the guitar and the people surrounding it, that maybe I had missed something, maybe my due diligence was poor. That is possible. I am very new to this. Two, that someone, particularly a couple different YouTube channels that I really respect and enjoy, one being CGS, who put a ton of kick-ass work into this, were under threat of litigation, and that somehow I would get them in trouble by proxy by using the information since I did cite them. Third, and lastly, that Paul Davids himself was under threat of litigation and that he was under pressure to try and sweep the entire narrative under the rug. And the last thing I would want is for one of the most popular YouTube guitarists in the world to catch heat because some random nobody on YouTube, myself, posted a video that furthered a narrative that everybody is trying to hush hush and cover up. Now, Paul Davids did respond to the controversy in a pinned comment in his original video. In short, he said that he saw both sides of the argument. He did see the inconsistencies that they are concerning. However, he also said that he saw a lot of provenance for the guitar, that he saw a lot of official documents, that he didn't think the owner was trying to deceive anyone, and at the end of the day, he didn't really want to take a side, but what was important is that Jimi Hendrix kicks ass, right? Now, I would love to link to you that pinned comment and video. However, in a recent development, that video has also been taken down, and I will get more into that in a bit. However, for now, I just want to go back to the beginning so I can explain how this all went down and hopefully keep my tangents to a minimum. The video from Paul Davids that kicked off the entire controversy was filmed at the famous guitar store and studio in Great Britain called 6060 Sounds. It starts off by him asking some of the patrons, and I think random people on the street, just what they think about Jimi Hendrix and why he's so influential. He goes over a short history of the establishment, Jimi Hendrix's and other famous artists' relationship to the place, and a short history of the Salt and Pepper Monterey Strat. The moment of truth comes where they bring out the guitar in its case, set it on a surface for Paul to inspect, and at this point in the video, Paul Davids is visibly shaking, as I'm sure I would be too if I thought I was about to play Jimi Hendrix's actual guitar. He opens the case, and there it is, a beautiful 1965-ish CBS transition era Salt and Pepper Fender Stratocaster. Paul gets in some nice close-up slow motion shots for the obligatory guitar porn and picks it up to finally plug it in and play it. Now, let me just say that whether or not this is the actual Monterey Strat in the end, when Paul Davids picked it up to play, man did it sound gorgeous. I wish the video was still up so that I could pull a clip from it so you could hear it. It's exactly what you would expect to hear from a vintage Fender Stratocaster, especially one that would have belonged to Jimi Hendrix. So Paul plays some licks on the guitar, and then it cuts to an interview between himself and Miles Poulton. Miles Poulton is the media influencer who represents the seller of the Monterey Strat. He's also the guy who set up the meeting at 6060 Sounds so that Paul could come and play the guitar. He states in the video, quote, "We wanted to give the opportunity for it to be seen in public again before it probably goes into a private collection and, well, it might not be played in public again," unquote. And ribs Paul about him being the one to show it off, and then goes on to say that the guitar will be going for up to $10 million. The video wraps up with Paul playing the guitar while giving a warm fuzzy conclusion about Jimi Hendrix, and suddenly the sun shines through on what was a cloudy English day, almost as if Jimi is smiling down from heaven on his old Stratocaster that he loved so much. Now, hold up, let's run that back a second, because at this point the guitar hasn't sold yet. So any kind of suggestion as to what the guitar should or will sell for is entirely speculation. Now, this goes for anything that you buy. The price is going to be determined by three things: overhead, supply, and demand. And in this case, demand is going to be the most important part in determining what the guitar should sell for. Now, if you've ever dealt with antique or vintage anything, you know that it's usually accompanied by provenance. The object itself does have monetary value, in this case a guitar, and you can get a brand new Fender Stratocaster for anywhere from $1,200 to like $3,000, just depending on what model and options you get. So when somebody pays $20,000 for a vintage instrument, what they're actually paying mostly for is the provenance. Now, this could be original documents or certifications. It could be chain of custody documents. It could be a trademark or serial number, or even the original tool marks. But this is what gives the object its historical significance. Now, if the instrument was owned by somebody famous like Jimi Hendrix, who completely changed music forever and turned the rock world on its head, then the weight of that provenance compounds. In this case, there just isn't that many Jimi Hendrix guitars that are floating around in the world, and there's even less Jimi Hendrix guitars that were played at the Monterey Pop Festival that just happen to be floating around in the world. And again, in this case, the way in which the instrument was used to record some of his more famous songs and played at the show that pretty much boosted him to fame, then that makes this instrument entirely unique. So some questions to ask that might give some insight are, what is this guitar sold for in the past? What is a collector willing to pay to have it in their collection, and do they expect it to appreciate in value, especially from $10 million? The most money ever paid for a guitar in the history of man, whether owned by a famous person or not, is $3.9 million. This is what somebody paid to have Dave Gilmour's, Pink Floyd, in case you didn't know. This is what somebody paid to have Dave Gilmour's choice black Stratocaster. Now, we can argue over who is better and whose guitar should be worth more all day long, but that won't get us anywhere. The fact of the matter is that to Pink Floyd fans, this guitar might as well be Excalibur. This is what Dave Gilmour used to record Pink Floyd's most notable and famous albums. This is the guitar that he took on tour with him for decades. Countless photo shoots, videos, the whole shebang. Conversely, the black and white Strat that Jimi Hendrix used to play at the Monterey Pop Festival is barely an afterthought when putting together the context of Jimi Hendrix's short but impactful career. Yes, the guitar was used to track some of his more famous songs, supposedly, but there just is no evidence or provenance to this effect, at least not publicly. So the fact that they came out and set the starting price at $7 million is just mind-blowing. Now look, I can't for the life of me begin to speculate what one of Jimi's guitars should or would go for on an open market. That is all subjective and would be determined by the demand for that particular artist and the instrument. Miles Poulton can claim whatever he would like, but until there is some kind of publicly available evidence or provenance, then we just have to kind of take his word for it. That's not something that I would feel comfortable doing when $7 to $10 million is on the line. Also, understand that the guitar is not on the open market. It's been made very clear by Miles that they want to commit to a private sale, and they are very selective about who and who does not get to see the provenance and who gets to make a bid. Going back to Miles Poulton's claim that he just wanted to give the public one last chance to see it before it ended up in the hands of a private buyer, never to be seen again, just doesn't hold any water. Miles Poulton is a media influencer. Now, maybe he's a dumb one, but he should know exactly how the internet works. If he had multiple private buyers on the line that were willing to pay $7 to $10 million for the guitar, showing it to the public is the last thing that he would want to do. That opens up the possibility of scrutiny directed at the guitar, and that's exactly what happened. If his real intention was just to show it to the public one last time before it ends up in the hands of a collector, never to be seen again, then the proper way to have done this would have been to have waited until after the guitar was sold and in the process of changing hands. With this kind of money involved, that transaction has to go through lawyers and accountants. You can't just roll up to a bank and say, hey, give me my $10 million and throw it in your trunk and roll out. No, this kind of transaction has to go through a certain process as it's considered capital gains. At that point of sale, it stops being unrealized gains and becomes actual capital for the seller. Now, especially if this is some kind of like ACH transaction or something to that effect, this can take a while, and there is plenty of time to say, hey, this is Jimi Hendrix's guitar, it just sold for this price, and here it is, look at it in all its glory. So, make no mistake, Miles Poulton did not invite Paul Davids out to 6060 Sounds to play the guitar as some kind of gesture of respect to the fans and to the estate. He did it because Paul Davids is one of the largest YouTube guitarists in the world, and he brings along multiple millions of subscribers to the table. As long as everything goes off without a hitch, This lends a massive amount of credibility to the guitar and its provenance. So by doing so, it is essentially creating a demand. Now, if you want to convince a private buyer that your guitar and its provenance is worth $10 million, well then gee golly gosh, it sure helps if there is a massive buzz going around about the sale of your guitar. It also helps if that generally and by consensus your guitar is accepted as authentic, legitimate, and above scrutiny. It's basically advertisement, or really a sleazy sales tactic that pressures any potential buyers into hurrying up and making a decision. If you wanted to buy something that has a very limited supply or even an exclusive one, then you don't want the word getting out that the item is for sale. If you were trying to have any breathing room to negotiate or even decide whether the item is worth what the seller is trying to sell it for, then this pretty much strips away a huge majority of your negotiating power and speeds up the metaphorical clock on your chance to obtain it. On its face, it doesn't mean that Miles Poulton did anything wrong, that he had any ill will, or that he was intentionally trying to deceive anyone. I have been researching and following this debacle for like the last 2 months, and I've had a lot of time to think about what the roles played by the seller and Miles Poulton are. Like everyone else, Miles must have seen the guitar and its private provenance before agreeing to take this position, and he must have been satisfied that it was all kosher, authentic, and legitimate. It's easy to lay all of this on Poulton, but I actually have to have a healthy respect for the guy. It is his job to represent his client, and he has done so. Viciously, I might add. From a principled perspective, it would be great if he was on the side of truth and transparency. However, as a general rule, there are no principles in sales and legal business, especially when it comes to media influencers. On the other hand, I have to respect the fact that he has stood by his client so fervently. Whether this is a principled stance, whether he actually believes or not what he's saying, or whether or not this is entirely for self-preservation, we just can't know for sure, as we can't see into his mind. But we can assess his actions and his reactions and form our own opinion on it. Now, Paul Davis did say in his original statement that was pinned to his original video that he was obligated to say that Miles Poulton did not intentionally try to deceive anyone. However, I have evidence to the contrary. But I want to say first that as far as the owner goes, apparently by many different accounts, he has been a very good sport about this, and he feels that he may have been ripped off and is looking to find out if the guitar is legitimate or not, and hopefully find a recourse if in fact he was scammed. I just wanted to put that out there because Miles Poulton, in the way that he handled all of this and the way he handled the publicity, it didn't do the seller any favors. And I think a lot of people were coming down on the seller just by a reaction to what Miles Poulton was saying and how he was smearing some very respectable YouTubers. It just was a very wrong way to go about it. I've watched source after source after source of mine just disappear from the internet like it never existed. Now, one of the publications that refuses to take down their articles in reference to this controversy is Guitar.com. In their first article, Did Paul Davis Really Play Jimi Hendrix's $10 million Strat? They point out some very serious glaring physical inconsistencies. Now, there are many to choose from, but for now, I want to focus on the headstock and neck, as those ones, at least to me, are the most obvious ones and the most damning ones. We know for sure that the guitar that Jimi Hendrix played at the Monterey Pop Festival did have a Fender tremolo system in it. You can clearly see it when he flips the guitar over to play with his teeth, with all 5 springs in the back, just like it would have come out of the factory. We also know that Jimi's guitar was from a transition era where there wasn't very much consistency with what would have been on the headstock as far as the kind of logo or the style of logo and the placement of that logo, hence the transition era. Luckily, photography has kind of been a thing for well over a century now, and as you can see, the guitar that Jimi Hendrix played did have the patent number underneath the Fender logo on his headstock like it should have come out of the factory. Now, on the found guitar that is in question, you can see there is no patent number underneath the Fender logo, as the logo itself has moved too close to the edge of the headstock to even have the number there. So that means that this is not the neck that was on the guitar when Jimi Hendrix played the Monterey Pop Festival. Guitar.com also points out that the guitar sold at liveauctioneers.com in 2012. Now, that fact is not only used by Miles to point to its credibility, it's also used by publications that were reporting on the upcoming sale of the guitar at the famous Heritage auction in 2017. I will get more into that in a minute, but for now, I want to focus on the Live Auctioneers sale. The guitar, lot 0075, is posted with a front and back picture of what I'm going to refer to as the found guitar. In other words, I'm not going to speculate whether or not the guitar is legitimate. I'm just going to refer to the guitar in its state when Jimi played it as the lost guitar, and when it appeared again more recently as the found guitar. The listing is titled Jimi Hendrix owned and played guitar. The description for this lot is as follows: Jimi Hendrix Monterey, the black Fender Stratocaster used by Jimi Hendrix to play the best part of his set at the legendary Monterey Pop Festival, and the Experience's first appearance in the USA 1967. The CBS era instrument with contour style body with original candy apple case dates from the late 1966-67 with rosewood neck and black solid body and white scratch protection and triple pickups, chrome key tuner pegs, mother of pearl dot fret inlays, 3-volume tone controls, tone switch, spring back plate missing. The guitar is in its original condition after use, various chips and wear scratches. Endless pictures of this guitar are available on the Monterey video, also photo news journals and biographies. The case is in a somewhat battered condition after further tours and gigs after Monterey, LOA, Rock Roadie, Annam Ltd, London. Estimate £120,000 to £180,000. Now, I apologize for not seeming to be able to read, but I have to say that for a guitar that is purportedly so famous, a legacy, and for a minimum of £120,000, I would expect that someone would take 10 minutes to proofread this crap and I guess make it make some sense. I would also expect that along with the two pictures of the guitar itself, that they would have done the bare minimum of posting a picture of Jimi Hendrix playing it. It basically tells people in the description, go look it up on YouTube, bro. Take from that what you will. All I'm saying is that it doesn't appear professional, and it just doesn't come off to me like they're really trying to sell the idea of the guitar. It's so matter of fact, yet it just doesn't elaborate on anything. So this is where things start to get really convoluted. If you look at the description of the listing, lot 0075, it says down at the bottom that there is a letter of authority stamped Rock Roadie Annam Limited, London. Now, I'm assuming that this is some kind of subsidiary or branch or even a different moniker of Rock Roadie Entertainment Group. So why is this so important? Because in 2009, James Tappy Wright released a book called Rock Roadie. It was co-written by Rod Weinberg, and it was released by JR Books Limited, first edition, January 1st, 2009. In this book, James Tappy Wright claims that he knows the real reason behind Jimi Hendrix's death, that he was murdered by his UK manager Michael Jeffrey for the insurance money, that he had some goons, or even himself, supposedly went to Jimi Hendrix's apartment and dumped a bunch of pills and alcohol down his throat to make it appear as if Jimi Hendrix had overdosed. Now, this claim was debunked by Jimi Hendrix's US manager, Bob Levine. He stated that he had talked to James Tappy Wright quite often, and in 2008, James had come to him stating that he needed a hook, that he had got a new book deal where he was supposed to be speaking about his misadventures being a roadie for Jimi Hendrix, as well as many other famous acts, and well, murder of an icon is definitely what I would call a hook. Now, even though Bob Levine debunked these claims, it didn't stop James Tappy Wright nor Rod Weinberg from starting their own LTD, an independent LTD of which they could claim $6,000 to $12,000 a pop on speaking fees, whether virtually or in person. I may dive deeper into this conspiracy theory at a later date, however, I probably won't because it's been done ad nauseum by many other channels who have done it way better than I ever could. I just wanted to allude to it because James Tappy Wright has been known for using his associations to Jimi Hendrix as well as many other famous artists to try and capitalize, make money, and push himself into the limelight. Maybe that's the crux of the entire argument and controversy, or at least the beginning of it, if you will. I wouldn't put it past James Tappy Wright to have taken one of Jimi Hendrix's old guitars that wasn't so well known, or maybe even a different Fender Stratocaster altogether that had nothing to do with anything, and then proceed to relic it and for all intents and purposes make it appear to be the Monterey Strat. He could then use his association to Jimi Hendrix to sell it to somebody that didn't know any better or have the resources to properly check the provenance. And as far as the provenance goes, you would be surprised how easy it is to get official looking documents, especially when you have those kind of connections. If there is one person in the world who is familiar enough with the actual Monterey Strat to have pulled this off, it's James Tappy Wright. He would also be the only person to know if something had happened to the actual guitar and know if there is a slim chance or no chance at all of the actual guitar ever resurfacing again. He could then use this to line his pockets and further his career, as well as the buzz from his new book in which he claims Jimi Hendrix was actually murdered by his ex-CIA MI5 MI6 manager for the insurance money, who was in deep with the cartels. And despite knowing this since 1971 or 1973, depending on which interview you reference, he never came public with it until he got a book deal. And that's because we all know that cartels and governments can't touch you once you have a book deal. That's the rules. I don't make them. If you have a problem with it, take it up with the cartels. Despite the fact that the listing looked very unprofessional for a guitar that's supposed to be selling for 6 figures and belonged to Jimi Hendrix, and that it was sold by somebody who was pretty scammy, that doesn't necessarily mean that the listing was not legitimate, however off-putting it might be. Now, what is even more off-putting is that Guitar.com and LiveAuctioneers.com both state that the guitar did in fact sell, and this is used as a point of credibility by Miles Poulton. But if you look at the listing, there is a button, or a tab if you will, that says click for sold price. When you click that button, it prompts you to make an account where you have to make a username and password and log in. I'm not sure if CGS or if Guitar.com actually did this, but if you do that and doom yourself to a lifetime of spam probably, you can go ahead and click the tab and get what the guitar actually sold for. I admit that I was expecting to see that it sold for about 200,000 pounds, maybe a little less, maybe around 150,000 pounds, but it didn't quite get that much. Nope, according to the website, it sold for 2 pounds. Not 200,000 pounds, not 20,000 pounds, 2 pounds. 2 pounds. 2 pounds. So neither the website nor the description actually give too much information about the sale of the guitar. They do, however, give us one lead, and that is that the authority was Rock Roadie Annam Limited London. Now we know that that is either an old subsidiary or an old moniker or title of Rock Roadie Entertainment Limited, the company that was started by James Tappy Wright and Rod Weinberg in order to facilitate their publicity for the book Rock Roadie. Now, James Tappy Wright passed away in 2016, so since the website www.rockroadie.net is now defunct. I was able to go on the Wayback Machine, but I wasn't really able to glean any new information other than that there was a publicity director named Joe Rinaldi, and it doesn't really seem that that is here nor there, that he has anything to do with any of this. But if anybody out there has any information that might point me in the right direction, admittedly this is still a rabbit hole that I'm trying to dive down and connect all the dots. I would really love to come back with another video and paint a much broader picture about this company, since they are in fact responsible for the original sale of this guitar. If the seller has been scammed, chances are these are the people that are responsible. But as for the guitar selling for 2 pounds, obviously this is a mistake. It can't be correct, because even if the guitar didn't belong to Jimi Hendrix, it still is a CBS transition era Fender Stratocaster. So that would have gone for a minimum of like $20,000, and that's even considering that it's an amalgamation of two different guitars, because as we know, that's not the original neck that came on the guitar. So this says one of two things, and the easiest explanation is that it's a misprint, a glitch, or a typo, and that somebody was trying to type in 200,000, they got sidetracked because they were really stoned, and hit enter, and now we have a supposed Jimi Hendrix guitar that sold for £2, and yeah, easy explanation, right? Another possible explanation is that the numbers are correct, and what the hell would that even mean? Nobody is going to just sell a Fender Stratocaster for £2. That makes no sense whatsoever, not unless it was done like when a parent wants to give their teenager their old car and put it in their name, so they sell them the car for like a minimum of $5 just so that they can avoid this massive amount of sales tax. Now, depending on where you live, there might be a fee or penalty for participating in this kind of sale, but a lot of times it's worth it for the purposes of paperwork and the title transfer. Likewise, I'm sure there is some kind of standard fee or premium for selling an item at auction, but maybe paying whatever premium or fee is worth it to make it appear to have sold this guitar at that auction. I can't find any articles from 2012 or before that mention or talk about or announce the sale of this guitar. You would think that a guitar that was used to play the best part of Jimi Hendrix's set at the Monterey Pop Festival would have garnered some attention, but apparently not. So again, just playing the devil's advocate, if I wanted to pass a guitar off that I knew either wasn't legitimate or maybe I had some concerns about its legitimacy, it would sure help me if I had a bill of sale from a previous auction. It might just help with some of the concerns about its legitimacy. Realistically, we'll probably never know what actually happened with the sale of the guitar. We'll probably never know what the real price that the lot sold for was. If the sale was currently open to the public, then we might have a chance to see some kind of documentation or bill of sale, but as I said before, the seller and Miles Poulton appear to want to keep the sale private and carefully select who and who does not see any documentation or provenance related to the guitar. So again, going back to the point, if you were going to behave this way, Miles, about sharing any information about the guitar, what really was the purpose of giving the public one last look at it? Now, let me stop myself there for a second because I want to make a few things very clear. Pretty much every bone that I have to pick with this entire situation all leads back to Miles Poulton. He has unfairly slandered, smeared, and misrepresented lots of people that have put a lot of hard work into this entire thing. He has unfairly cast them aside as clout chasers and minimized the work that they've done. Now, I would like to rectify this, and while I've talked to many of my sources and I'm not going to divulge any personal information that they wouldn't want me to, I am, however, going to reference Miles Poulton's own letter and response to the controversy, and I'm going to go through line by line and debunk every single piece of bullshit in there. And yes, I'm going to expose him for the liar that he is. However, I want to make sure and be clear that I differentiate between Miles Poulton and the actual seller of the guitar. Now, I'm sure that Miles Poulton isn't the only person guilty of this in this situation. However, he himself is definitely guilty of the phenomenon known as failing upwards. Failing upwards is when you use the incredibly short public collective memory to retell events surrounding a past blunder or conundrum, to frame it in such a way that it can be used in your favor instead of against you. Usually such an event has very vague specifics where little is known or can be found out about the event due to there not being enough corroborating witnesses or evidence. In other words, an event that should bring shame upon someone can be retold by that person to reframe it in a way that there just isn't anyone else left for whatever reason to say otherwise. What I can tell you is that when you look up photos of the black and white Monterey Strat, the two photos that most commonly come up are the ones used in the liveauctioneers.com sale. Yes, from the Live Auctioneers auction, but more so from the publications that were promoting the sale of the guitar at the Heritage auction in 2017. So just to be clear, I can't find anything from before liveauctioneers.com, And in the interim between live auctioneers and the heritage auction, again, there's nothing. But in just a few short years, the price jumped from about $200,000 to more than double that. Experts at the Heritage Auction House said that it could bring up to $750,000 and that the starting bid would open at $500,000. Gee, it's almost as if the bill of sale from liveauctioneers.com lent credibility to the provenance. Imagine that. So, spoiler alert, and this is one of the most contentious points around the guitar. The guitar was supposed to sell at the Heritage Auction in June of 2017. However, it was pulled from sale just a few weeks prior. The sale that was supposed to take place was published and syndicated by publications everywhere, so it was by no means a secret. And while most have been pulled down, you can find defunct articles that are pretty much copy-pasted from each other everywhere you look. They are everywhere on the internet. Every single one of them is announcing and speaking about the sale of this guitar at the Heritage Auction. And the Heritage Auction is a pretty huge thing. They sell some of the coolest and most expensive collectibles in the world. They also have some of the most intelligent, knowledgeable, and most experienced experts of any auction house in the world. So many of the people who are naysayers about the found guitar use the fact that it was pulled from this auction, that it was rumored to have been found illegitimate, and that's why it was pulled from sale. Miles Poulton responded and released a statement on behalf of himself and his client that attempts to explain why the guitar was unable to be sold at the Heritage Auction, and it goes as follows. From Miles Poulton, quote, "Firstly, with regards to the Heritage Auction's withdrawal point raised, the guitar was due to be sold by Heritage in 2017 in the USA. It was withdrawn for a variety of logistical reasons, but not because of provenance issues. We have confidentially shared the correspondence from Fender to Heritage at the time after their detailed inspection of the instrument and confirmation that Fender were totally satisfied." So let me translate. By confidentially shared, that means that he had everyone sign non-disclosure agreements and that they were not allowed to share their findings or their opinions publicly so that no one else could use their information to reach the same conclusion. And as far as Fender goes, what the hell were they satisfied with? That it was a real Fender guitar? Because how the hell could they tell if it was a real Jimi Hendrix Monterey Strat? Now back to Miles Poulton. Quote, "With regards to Paul David's piece, shortly after his amazing video, we were both contacted by a representative from a small YouTube channel specializing in faking guitars. I agreed to take a call from the channel. We explained that unfortunately we could not collaborate with every media outlet, and as such we weren't at liberty to share the provenance documents. The channel seemed very unhappy about this and made it known." Okay, first of all, Miles misrepresents the small YouTube channel as specializing in faking guitars, as if the guy builds fake guitars and chipsins. No, the guy niches in people trying to sell fake guitars and pointing out how to tell they're fake. He also does a lot of commentary on lawsuits involving copyright claims and other things involving big rock bands and musicians. It's kind of a variety channel with a niche and specialization in sniffing out bullshit. Also, Miles fails to mention that he was totally happy to talk to the small YouTube channel until the small YouTube channel admitted to him that he had already made what Miles referred to as a spoiler video, wherein the small YouTube channel had just read the article from guitar.com raising the concerns about whether or not the guitar was legitimate. Back to Miles again, quote, "The aforementioned channel then proceeded to hound Paul Davids and myself via social media and emails." Now, Miles. This is not true. I saw all the conversations. They were professional and given in good faith. On top of that, trying to speak for Paul David saying that this channel was harassing him, well, let's just say that you're speaking for somebody that you don't have the right to speak for. Quote, "Shortly after this, damaging videos of hashed together content casting doubt on the instrument began running on YouTube. These videos have now been taken down after our lawyers were briefed on their content. This issue is ongoing." So there he goes right there. The cat is out of the bag. Now we know that Miles 100% for sure is threatening litigation to anyone that tries to go against his narrative. On top of everything, the entire thing is a lie. Many of these videos were up long before the small YouTube channels. One was even featured in the Guitar.com article. Here Miles is trying to blame the small YouTube channel that it caused this by harassment and bullying and shit posting. That's just not the case. There was already plenty of doubt that was sown around the guitar, including my own and including a lot of other people's. Quote, during this period, we were in constant conversation with Paul about the title of his piece and support the fact that he didn't want to be caught in the middle of these issues being preached by a small number of channels trying to up their viewing and income off the back of the 1.7 million views on Mr. David's piece. Okay, what he really meant to say was that Paul David saw exactly what he did, didn't want to scrap the whole thing because of the amount of work he'd put into it, however, wasn't going to leave the video up under its original title and mislead his viewing audience, but also couldn't name it "I played a fake Jimi Hendrix Strat" because you probably threatened him with litigation. And also, yeah buddy, every channel is just trying to clout chase because they don't agree with you. Really classy, man, really classy. Sit down, you Vic. Quote, we are completely satisfied with the provenance of the guitar. The guitar guy I'm sorry, let me try that again. Okay, back to Miles. Quote, we are completely satisfied with the provenance of the guitar. Guitar.com's readers can Google the many articles written about it over the years in major guitar publications and other trusted outlets, including a variety of international museums. Another lie. Most of these articles that he refers to have been pulled down. We've seen how you control the narrative, Miles, and we've seen how you selectively pick what can and can't be said about the guitar under threat of litigation. Quote, we have on 2 occasions offered access and details on the instrument to Guitar.com. That offer still stands. So really, Miles, you offered documentation? Funny, because Guitar.com didn't mention it. I'm sure there weren't any stipulations like, I don't know, non-disclosure agreements or litigation, or maybe some kind of agreement where in return they must take down their articles or edit them to say what you want. Somehow I just don't think that you were just outright like, hey, here's the provenance. I don't even know even. Just stop.
Stop it.
Anyway, Heritage Auction issued their own press release statement pertaining to the reasons that the guitar was pulled from sale. However, this press release was pulled down very shortly after its publication. I'm beginning to notice a pattern. I don't even know even. So I went to the Heritage Auction site and I looked through their archives, and wouldn't you know it, I couldn't even find it even in their own archives because it was deleted. I even checked the Wayback Machine, and despite having snapshots on both sides of the sale, it was still erased from history down into the memory hole. So what exactly is trying to be hidden and why? Miles clearly stated that the guitar was pulled for a variety of logistical reasons and definitely not because of the provenance. He even stated that he had correspondence between Fender and the Heritage Auction House where Fender claims they were satisfied with the guitar. And again I ask, what the were they satisfied with? And since Heritage Auctions has taken down their press release, there is just absolutely no way of knowing for sure, and we just have to take Miles' word for it. Oh, but wait a minute, what is this? Dallas Associated Press. Heritage Auctions has halted the planned offering of a guitar purported to have been played by Jimi Hendrix at the 1967 Monterey Pop Festival amid concerns it's not that particular instrument. Dallas-based Heritage Auction on Tuesday announced the guitar, originally estimated to bring up to $750,000, will no longer be up for sale on June 17th. A Heritage statement says auction house experts examined the instrument and cited concerns that it may not be the same guitar Hendrix played at the Monterey in California event. Uh-oh, Miles. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, Miles. This article by the Associated Press has been mirrored by a myriad of publications, and while a lot of them have been taken down and some of them are defunct, there are still plenty of them out there for you to find with a quick Google search and a couple keywords. And as we already know by Miles' own admission in his public statement, he does threaten litigation against anyone who goes against the narrative. So what I'm willing to bet happened here is that the Heritage Auction House did actually look at the Monterey Strat and determined that they couldn't conclusively say that it was the Stratocaster that was played at the Monterey Pop Festival by Jimi Hendrix. And because of the inconsistencies and their doubts, they didn't want to be liable for selling the guitar if in fact it did happen to be a fake or a copy. Subsequently, the Heritage Auction would have dropped the guitar from sale and then issued a standard press release to their patrons to say that it had been dropped and why. This would have cast a doubt on the guitar. It would have prompted litigation or a threat of litigation from the representative. Now, the Heritage Auction House, they're not stupid. They obviously were not satisfied with some aspect of the provenance or the guitar. That's why it got pulled from sale. They probably did not have enough evidence to conclusively say that no, this is not the Monterey Pop Festival Strat. Therefore, that while I am willing to bet that the threats of litigation would have been a bluff, if a representative did take the Heritage Auctions to court and could prove that the press release caused some kind of financial damages, then the Heritage Auction House could potentially end up being liable for it. So the Heritage Auction could have taken a chance and rolled the dice on being sued, and maybe they would have been sued, but even if they were, chances are they would have won their case. But the problem with that is that it's expensive. So then the question becomes, is it worth winning, or does anyone really win if it costs you 2 years of your life and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars? So it's not worth it, and it's in their best interest to basically tuck tail and run, erase and delete everything and just pretend like the whole thing never happened. And you know what? I don't really blame them for it. You see, the problem here is that Miles wanted to use and step all over the public space while trying to boost his private one. You see, us peasants, we're not privy to his millions of dollars sale, so our input doesn't matter. So just buzz off, you little peasants. Your input isn't wanted here. Who cares what you say? You don't have millions of dollars to buy my guitar, so just, I don't want to hear it. Miles Poulton pretty much took a dump on Paul David's channel, which is very loved and revered. And then he went and smeared a bunch of people that were trying to get to the bottom of it. You see, when Miles was on Paul David's video, he wanted, or rather demanded, the good faith of Paul David's viewing audience. But when the viewing audience started raising questions and concerns, well then Miles in bad faith smeared them and then wrote a public statement that didn't exactly show them in the best light, and it was at best misleading. Miles can claim that we are all just pesky peasant crackpot YouTube channels that are just chasing clout to our heart's content. However, we can hit back, and the fact of the matter is that what CGS, Guitar.com, and a lot of other channels did hit hard enough that Miles had to get legal involved to do some damage control. As far as Paul Davids goes, he didn't deserve any of this, and he definitely didn't ask for it. I'm sure he's under pressure from both sides, and I think we have to understand that he's just a guy that is trying to run his business, which happens to be a large YouTube channel. He got sucked into this by one side that wanted to use him for his influence and his massive subscriber base, and then on the other side, I'm sad to say that I've seen him get heckled because he doesn't want to get involved and take a side. I think we can all understand that there is much more nuance to these business practices, especially when in the business your reputation is everything. So how do I wrap this up and put a bow on top? What kind of lesson can we take away from all this? Just know that people don't always have your best interest at heart. They will lie and misrepresent to fill and protect their pockets. When you are dealing with salespeople, the devil is in the details, or more accurately, the devil is in the details that they don't want you to see. While you might have heard the phrase, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, also consider, don't look at them in the face when they're talking out their ass. You might get kicked or shit on. Despite all the grief, there is actually a lot of good that has come from this. Because of many people's hard work, especially CGS and Guitar.com, someone has most likely been saved from losing up to $10 million. Also, because of their hard work, the message actually got through to the seller, who, unlike Miles, was actually very gracious about the whole thing and obviously has his own concerns now that he's seen and heard the evidence presented. He's going to be convening an expert panel to determine whether or not the Monterey Strat is real, and hopefully we can get to the truth of the whole thing. Regardless of what happens, I just hope that he has a way to get his money back if in fact he was scammed. Now, if he was the one that bought the guitar from Rock Roadie Entertainment Limited, I'm not exactly sure how that would happen, especially since James Tappy Wright has been dead since 2016, but hopefully he went through an auction house or something to that effect, so maybe he has some kind of recourse there. Maybe he can get reimbursed because somebody didn't do their due diligence when putting the item up for sale. Unfortunately, no matter which way you cut it, James Tappy Wright was in the chain of custody of that guitar, and that personally makes me trust the whole thing about as far as I can throw James Tappy Wright, and he was a pretty big guy. He also, unfortunately, was probably the only other person other than Jimi Hendrix himself who could have properly ID'd the Monterey Strat on site. And if he was in fact part of a scam, then that would kind of make it a conflict of interest. Actually, everyone who is in the chain of custody of that guitar is dead or has dropped off the face of the earth. The only other person who might have had a say is Bob Levine, but I'm not exactly sure what has happened to Bob Levine, but the last article that I could find that mentions him is from 2013, where he says he's back in business, he has taken a new band under his wing, and that he feels good. But there is an article from 2012, the year before, where the guy is interviewing him about his storied life, and Bob Levine confesses that he is feeling his age, that he's mostly blind, and that his health is just in general serious decline. There is also a video from either 2016 or 2017 where he appears to be in an assisted living home, and somebody is asking him again about James Tappy Wright's claims, and Bob Levine pretty much tears them up and debunks them and says that Tappy Wright just needed a grabber for his book, and that Murder Conspiracy is a good grabber. Now, I know that this leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to the story of the Monterey Strat, that there isn't a conclusion yet, but this is a huge step in the right direction, and I am really impressed with the progress that the people that were pushing on this were able to make. Also, massive respect to the owner again for agreeing to put together this panel of experts. I think that since they will have access to the guitar and the provenance and actually have the liberty to investigate and follow up on leads, I think that a lot of really cool revelations will come from that. And even if in the end this doesn't turn out to be the Jimi Hendrix Salt and Pepper Monterey Strat, that doesn't mean that it wasn't a Jimi Hendrix guitar. In fact, there are a lot of bits of evidence that point to it actually being a Jimi Hendrix guitar. Yes, as hard as it is to believe, Jimi Hendrix did not in fact only just burn his guitars, he also modified them from time to time. And by time to time, I mean a lot. And by a lot, I mean like all of them. In Paul David's video, when he's interviewing Miles Poulton, Miles mentions that the selector switch had to be replaced. Now, the layman Jimi Hendrix fan probably wouldn't have thought anything of it. However, us guitar nerds probably saw it right away. What they didn't know is that one of the most common mods that Jimi Hendrix did to his guitar was take the spring off of his selector switch. On the old Fender guitars, they only had three-way selector switches. So what Jimmy would do would take off the scratch guard and take off this little spring here from the selector switch, and that way, instead of when you go from position 1 to 2, that the position just smoothly snaps from 1 to 2 because of the spring, there now is no spring, and you can leave it in the middle, which will leave both pickups hot, giving you a new position 2, and instead of just having 1, 2, and 3, you now have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, Fender would eventually make a 5-way switch to accommodate this, but back in the day when Jimi Hendrix was playing, that was one of the modifications he had to do to get the sound that he wanted. I'm going to leave the link to CGS's video right here, so you can go check that out. That's his latest one where he goes much more into depth about the selector switch and the context of it. But the point is that Jimi Hendrix did make a lot of modifications to his guitars. The Fender Stratocaster in question is consistent with that in the fact that it does have a lot of the modifications that Jimi Hendrix might have made. So even if it isn't the Monterey Strat, there is a good chance that it still was one of Jimmy's guitars. And on top of all that, if you did get to see Paul David's video, you would have noticed that it did have a particular sound to it. A particular sound that is very, very unique to Jimi Hendrix. So take all that with a grain of salt, make of it what you will. Even though there's been a lot of progress made on this whole thing, the saga is still not quite over yet. I'm sure when the experts are allowed to examine the guitar that a lot of revelations will be made, and hopefully if they're allowed to share the information, then I'm sure there will be a lot of twists to go along with it. So just to come around full circle and finally end this video, I just hope that CGS at least keeps his guard up. And I guess CGS, if you watch this video and you've actually made it this far, this is just my 2 cents. Take it or leave it, no hard feelings. If not, just please keep your guard up to the owner and Miles Poulton as well still. And the reason I say this is that even though the owner has been more forthcoming and is a lot nicer, that doesn't necessarily mean that this isn't perfectly priming itself to be another heritage auction situation. Look, you are an intelligent guy, so just keep this in mind. The guitar has been examined by a panel of experts before, and we both know the conclusion of that. Now, I am all for giving the owner the benefit of the doubt. That is absolutely the correct thing to do. I am just playing devil's advocate and pointing out a situation in where these experts examine the guitar and then suddenly they go silent and won't speak about it again. Then we are pretty much left with the same amount of information that we have today that we figured out on our own. And then the guitar goes up for sale in another 5 years, only this time for $20 million. And then this, all of this, what all of us are trying to do and the experts, gets leveraged as credibility and legitimacy for the guitar. Now, I don't think that's what the owner's trying to do. I'm just pointing out that there is a pattern around this guitar. We've all seen it. You've seen it. I've seen it. All of us. So just be careful and keep your guard up. Let's not have this be another heritage auction thing. If you enjoyed the video, then, do the stuff. Otherwise, let me know in the comments section if you think I'm onto something or if I'm full of it, and I might cover this in the future, so subscribe if that's your thing. Other than that, I'm out.